Salve Maria! Welcome back to this marvelous series on Dona Lucilia. In the 7th episode, we are going to talk to you about how she educated her children, how she instilled in them the sense of marvelous by the type of toys that she bought for them for Christmas or for their birthday, the stories she told them, in the education that she gave them. One of the ways that she instilled a sense of marvelous in her children were the toys that she bought for them. Through toys, Dona Lucilia sought to remind José and Plinio about the marvelous world of the European civilization that they had been recently introduced to. She categorically avoided any toy that would tend to vulgarity or a secular mindset. Rather, she favored toys that elevated the children to the sense of marvelous and to God. When planning Christmas shopping, Dona Lucilia would take José and Plinio to the best toy stores in São Paulo and let them browse through all the toys to their heart's content. Since both of them were very demonstrative, it was very easy for Dona Lucilia to see which toy they liked the most. And in that way, when the Christmas day came, the surprise for the children was all the better because it was exactly what they were wishing for. She also had a carpenter once make a dollhouse for her daughter, which afterwards Dona Lucilia herself made the curtains, sewed them, put them in the house, designed the furniture. The toy soldiers that Dona Lucilia bought for Plinio were his favorite. They were decked in beautiful uniforms, colorful uniforms. That Plinio himself, he would set them out in parades, battle formations, and he was able to amass a collection of over 1,000 toy soldiers, that he had fond memory of them for the rest of his life. Among the gifts that Plinio received from his mother that he liked the most were puzzles that Dona Lucilia would bring from Europe and other places of beautiful sceneries, such as castles, palaces, scenes from the Far East like the Taj Mahal, or Bedouins going through the desert with the sand tinged by the reddish sunset. All these things Lucilia did to elevate the mind of her children, to have them thinking of things that are beautiful, that are marvelous, to bring them, seeing these things that are beautiful, it'd be easier for them to think of God. Whoever would consider Dona Lucilia's maternal care in a superficial way will be gravely mistaken. Her maternal instinct, her kindness, her goodness did not cancel out the other virtues of severity and intransigence against anything evil and unjust. When duty called, no matter how difficult it was, if there was some evil to be rejected, Dona Lucilia never gave in, not even 1 millimeter. But in also doing this, she never lost her gentleness of conduct. For example, she never permitted a change in routine. She always insisted on when you would wake up, say your prayers in the morning, say your prayers before going to bed, to say grace before and after meals. There was a time to go to bed, a time to wake up. She never deviated from any of these rules. And to help her in educating her children in this way, while they were in Germany, she, admiring and analyzing the German people, their sense of discipline, their uprightness, but even their candor, especially in music and art, she decided to hire a governess, a German governess, for her children. And this governess she hired her name was Fräulein Mathilde. Dr. Plinio, many years later, he said that one of the best things my mother ever did for us was to hire Fraulein Mathilde, our governess. He would say she was a stupendous teacher. She taught us French, English, and even German. And also, we learned German very fluently, and she would always speak to us in German. But the most useful thing that Rosé, Dr. Plinio would say, the most useful thing that Dona Rosé and I learned from our governess was the German method. To do everything, once you started something, you would do it until the end. Although Dona Lucilia entrusted the care of her children to the governess, she never took her eye off of her children. She would discuss how they were doing with the governess, and she always made time for whenever the children came to speak to her, whether it was to ask a counsel or to ask her to tell them a story. Dona Lucilia was mindful of the fact that everyone born with original sin, everyone has inside their soul a seed of a saint or a seed of a reprobate. That's why Dona Lucilia always maintained that she had to educate her children, keep an eye on her children, guide her children, and if necessary, to correct her children. Whenever the governess or somebody else told Dona Lucilia about a naughty thing that one of her children did, she would right away have the child called to her. A butler or a maid will go running, looking for the child. Finding the child, would bring the child to Dona Lucilia. When the child realized what happened, they knew that there was no excuse to be made. Dona Lucilia had very poor health, so she spent most of her day lying on a reclining chair or a couch inside a sitting room in her house with the curtains closed, so there wasn't much light inside the room. So she would be lying there, and her children would come in. The child that had done something wrong would come in. She would call them to come close to her. She would put her arm around them, look deep into their eyes, and say, "My child, did you do this or that?" And with that gaze and that goodness, the child would say, "Yes, I did." And then she would say, "But why would you do something like that?" And the child would reply, like many children, "Because I wanted to." But then Dona Lucia would say, "But it was wrong that you did that. Do you realize what you did was wrong?" But she would never let the child fall into a certain despair. She would always show them that there was a solution. And then after that, she would tell them, "My child, say sorry to your mother now." And they would say, "I'm sorry, Mama." And after that, then she would hug them, kiss them. It was such an outpouring of love that she would pour out to her children. That Dr. Plinio said years later that with these outpourings of love, after he was punished, he was corrected. He said he was almost tempted to commit a fault again just to be able to receive that goodness from his mother. Sometimes the punishment had to be a little more severe because of the fault that was committed. And Dona Lucilia would use a silver hairbrush to smack her son or her daughter in the hand. So she would call her son or her daughter and say, "My child, what you did was wrong for this reason, that reason." And after an explanation, After the explanation of what he did wrong, she would ask him, "Do you understand?" "Yes, Mama, I do." So she would say, "Now hold out your hand, and you're going to receive so many smacks for what you did." But the little Plinio said, Dr. Plinio would say years later, that what he dreaded more than the smack was the gaze of his mother, the censor for us, the wrong that he did. And Dona Lucilia, when she would start smacking, giving him a smack in the hand, she would stop and say, "My son, I want you to realize that what I'm doing now is hurting me more than it's hurt you. But I have to do this out of duty." When she would start smacking Plinio's hand, she would say, "Having to do this hurts me more than you. But I suffer for your sake, since you must be punished." After she finished smacking him on the hand, she would say, "Now ask your mother for forgiveness." And of course he would. And then again, the outpouring of her goodness and kindness, she would cover him with kisses and hug him. Decades later, Dr. Plinio kept, until the end of his life, this silver brush as a reminder of his mother. One time, Dona Lucilia told Monsignor Roncla a story of what happened to little Plinio. And now I'm going to read from the book, because to try to say this in my own words is going to be far inferior to the words of Dona Lucilia herself. When Plinio was still very young, the children's governess came to me one day and asked me where he was. She had lost sight of him and supposed he was with me. But seeing that he was not, she said anxiously, "I was sure I would find him with you, as I always do when he leaves his toys." "Well, let's go and search for him," I replied. "You look upstairs, and I will check for him downstairs." Since neither of us found him, we switched floors. Fraulein looked for him on the ground floor, while I searched upstairs. It was then, as I passed by a room that opened onto a high balcony, that I spotted Plinio lying along its ledge, sleeping peacefully. I immediately saw his danger, and any abrupt movement could make him fall off. You can imagine how her heart felt when she saw him there. The balcony, if he would have fallen down, he would have been very seriously injured. Back to Dona Lucilia's words. I called two of the stronger maids and told them to go down to the yard and hold a folded blanket firmly under the ledge, to break his fall in case he tumbled off. When I saw that they were in place, I crept onto the balcony with the governess, very quietly, to avoid startling him. When we reached the ledge, I climbed up onto a chair, carefully wrapped my arms around him, and called him by name. "Plinio, my son." He awoke and, turning towards me, said, "Yes, Mama." I immediately took him into my arms, and with the help of the governess, brought him down from the ledge. Sitting him on my lap in the dining room, I said, "My son, you have so many places where you can rest. You have your bed, your mother's sofa. You have these armchairs. Why did you want to sleep in such a dangerous place?" Still unaware of the risk he had run, a little surprised at my concern, he innocently answered, "Ah, Mama, I climbed up there to enjoy the view, and while I was there, I got tired and fell asleep." "My little son," I continued, "you must promise never to do that again." He promptly and willingly agreed. These were her words. She spoke these to Monsignor Joan. Clap. In Dona Lucilia's home, it wasn't just her and her family. She had many nieces and nephews that would come and go, and every Thursday, the whole family, relatives, would get together for dinner. The adults would have dinner in the dining room, and the children would have their dinner in another room. And as always happens with children, they finish before the adults. So they would go to the door of the dining room, because they were not allowed to enter, and start making gestures and calling to Dona Lucilia, because they wanted her to tell them some stories. Dona Lucilia, sometimes she would pretend she didn't see what they were doing and finish her dinner tranquilly. Then she would excuse herself from the rest of the adults and go into the room adjacent to the dining room to tell them the story. So she would sit down on her couch, and the children would all be around her, up close, and some even behind her, climbing on the arms and the back of the couch, eagerly awaiting to hear her stories. She would tell them stories like Puss in Boots, Cinderella, but as you can well imagine, the descriptions that she would put into these stories, not even the authors would think about them. She'd describe the clothes, the jewels, the carriages, the colors, everything. And the children would be in awe around her. And by doing this, and by telling these stories in these ways, Dona Lucilia would elevate their souls and minds to the beautiful things. And by elevating their minds, the things that are beautiful, ultimately would help them to think more about God and heavenly things. Other times, Dona Lucilia would convey a moral or religious lesson in her story. One of the stories that she told the children, showing this moral lesson, was a story called The Lame Nobleman, from the time of the Ancien Regime in France. She explained in the story how there was a group of boys in the town square, talking lively, happily. And all of a sudden, they start hearing the hoofs of a horse, and the sound of the wheels of a carriage coming. And they would turn and see this beautiful carriage drawn by white horses, with a beautiful coat of arms emblazoned on the door of the carriage. See the crystal windows, and they realized there was some nobleman that was coming. So the carriage would stop, the lackeys would come down, they would open up the door, another would be holding the horses, another one would drop down the steps. So the boys came around to look and see who arrived. And Dona Lucilia describing the curtains inside the carriage, and how they see this handsome young man coming out of the carriage. And with the flick of the wrist, he puts on his tricorn hat. But then they realize him stepping out, he comes out with crutches. Why is he with crutches? Because he's missing one of his feet. And then the boys, they realize that wealth is not everything. They themselves are happier, and they have their feet, all their limbs. They don't have the money, the wealth of the nobleman. But with that, Dona Lucilia would show her little listeners the important things in life. How money is not what's most important in life. It was not only through storytelling that Dona Lucilia aroused the interest in the marvelous and the good manners. She did it all the time. And one of the other times that she would instill the sense of marvelous in her children was the time of Carnival. Back in those days, 1915, 1916, Carnival was nothing like it is nowadays. Today, you can't even go. The immorality, frenzy. Back in those days, it was a family event, and everything was beautiful. And one of these times, these carnivals, Dona Lucilia dressed her children as a little marquis and a little marquise. But she didn't only just dress them up, she taught them how to act like a little marquis. She taught Plinio how to make a bow, reverence, taking off his bicorn hat. She taught Rosé how to curtsy like a noblewoman. In the Carnival of 1917, she dressed her daughter as a Persian princess and Plinio as a Maharaja from India. When her children asked her, "What is a Persian princess? Where are they from? What's a Maharaja? Where is he?" Dona Lucilia explains the two lived in the Orient, in this mystical and mythical bygone era, shrouded in mystery, in beauty, living in these fairy tale-like castles and palaces. And after the children would be dressed in their costumes, they would put their minds, start thinking like they were a Maharaja or a Persian princess. Thinking of the marvelous, seeing in the clothes they were wearing, the silks, the beautiful silks, the precious stones, the necklaces, the turbans, the panaches. Everything, once again, Dona Lucilia doing this to elevate her children to the marvelous and more important things, never bringing them down to vulgar ugliness, but being Dona Lucilia, an extremely Catholic woman and mother. When it came time for their first Holy Communion, she wanted her children to understand what was happening, what was going to happen to them, who they were going to receive. So she arranged with the parish priest to teach them catechism. But she didn't just leave it up to the parish priest. She herself followed what they were learning in catechism. She would ask them questions. She would teach them other things too. But one of the more interesting things, different, that Dona Lucilia would do, back then, just like nowadays, when it came time for the children's first Holy Communion, everybody was thinking about the festivities afterwards. But Dona Lucilia, she said no. The festivities will be the next day. On the day of the first Holy Communion, I want you, my children, to be thinking only about that. Because who you're going to receive is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You're going to receive the Creator of everything, your Creator. You're going to receive in the Eucharist the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. So when the day came, she dressed Plinio in an Eton suit and Rosé in a bridal gown. And she allowed them to wear their first Holy Communion clothing for the whole day, so that they could ponder, think about what had happened to them, who they had received. And she told them, "My children, I want you to understand that today is the most important day in your life after your baptism. Because in your baptism, you became children of God. And today, in receiving the Holy Eucharist, you're receiving this God within your soul." Thank you very much in following this series to honor Dona Lucilia. Salve Maria.